A man named Tim lives with his quirky but loving family. His mom Mary is always busy. His retired dad James loves to talk and play table tennis with him. His sweet uncle Desmond is always around. And his carefree sister is named Kit Kat. Together, they follow the same routine: tea by the beach every day, and movie nights every Friday. Every year, they also throw a New Year's Eve party for their family and friends. Before midnight, Tim's friend Jay wants to help him meet a girl, so he pulls him along, and they end up knocking over a table by accident. Jay eventually leaves Tim with a girl named Polly, and when the countdown ends, Polly leans in for a kiss, but Tim just shakes her hand. The girl walks away feeling let down. The next morning, Tim wakes up with a hangover and regret. Later, his dad calls him to his room and tells him something that will change his life. That's when James reveals a family secret: all the men in their family can travel back in time. Tim thinks it's just a joke, but James insists it's real. He explains they can only go back to moments they've already lived and still remember. Even though Tim isn't sure what to believe, he's curious, so he asks how it works. James tells him to go to a dark space, like a closet, clench his fists, and think of the moment he wants to revisit. Tim says he'll try, but if it turns out to be a prank, his dad's going to hear from him. He steps into his closet, clenches his fists, and thinks of the party the night before. A few moments later, he opens the door and realizes he's back in the same clothes he wore that night. He goes downstairs and is surprised to see he's really back at the New Year's Eve party. Jay drags him again, but this time Tim pulls him aside so they don't knock over the table. When the countdown ends, Tim kisses Polly right away. Now sure his power is real, he returns to the present and asks his dad for advice. James warns him not to use it to get rich, or he might end up like his grandfather, alone and without friends. He tells Tim to think of something that would truly make him happy. Right now, all Tim wants is to find a girlfriend. That summer, Kit Kat's friend Charlotte comes to stay with them for 2 months. Tim is drawn to her right away. One day while they're sunbathing, Charlotte asks him to put sunscreen on her back. Tim quickly jumps in to help, but he spills the whole bottle and gets flustered. He runs to the closet to travel back, and the second time, when Charlotte asks again, he stays calm and doesn't make a mess. The whole summer, Tim tries to win her over, but nothing ever works. On Charlotte's last night, he finally gets the courage to go to her room and tell her how he feels. But Charlotte says he should have told her sooner, while there was still time. With that, Tim heads back to the closet and rewinds again. This time when he confesses, Charlotte says to let summer play out and ask her again on her last night. Tim feels like there's no hope. On her final day, Charlotte says goodbye, and Tim realizes that not even time travel can make someone fall in love. The next day, Tim leaves home to start his law career in London. He'll be staying with his dad's friend Harry, a grumpy playwright who's always in a bad mood. On his first day at the law firm, Tim becomes friends with a man named Rory. Chasing his career didn't do much for Tim's love life. 6 months passed, and he still hadn't found a girlfriend. That was until one night, when Jay invited him to a restaurant where people eat in total darkness. They shared a table with 2 women, and Tim ended up having a great conversation with one of them. After dinner, Jay left with Joanna to help her get a cab. A bit later, Mary, the woman Tim had talked with, stepped outside. Tim was stunned and nearly speechless, but he managed to awkwardly ask for her number. They agreed to meet again, and Tim felt like he had just fallen in love. He went home smiling, but when he arrived, he saw that Harry was in a state of panic. One of the actors in his new play had forgotten his lines. Wanting to help, Tim headed into his dark room and traveled back in time. He joined Harry at the theater and made sure the actor practiced his lines. The play started off great, but then another actor forgot his part. Tim had to go back in time again, and this time, with his help backstage, the play went smoothly from start to finish. Harry was finally pleased. Later that night, Tim tried to call Mary, but her number was gone. Their dinner never happened. Since he had gone back in time to help Harry, Tim was crushed. The next morning, Harry showed him a newspaper featuring the success of his play. Then Tim spotted an ad for a Kate Moss exhibit. He remembered that Mary loved Kate Moss, so he went to the exhibit and waited there, sitting around day after day. A whole week passed before Mary finally showed up. Tim went to talk to her, and though she found him strange at first, his persistence paid off. He managed to have lunch with her and her friend. But Tim's heart sank when he found out that Mary now had a boyfriend named Rupert. He asked where and when they met, and found out it was just a week ago at Joanna's party. Without hesitation, Tim rushed to the restroom and traveled back 1 week. At the party, he spotted Mary looking bored and alone. He walked up, introduced himself, and asked her to skip the party and have dinner with him instead. She agreed, and they spent a lovely evening together. After getting to know each other more, they went to her place, and Tim spent the night there. Their relationship grew stronger over time, and eventually, Tim moved in with Mary. One day, Mary's parents visited their home. Tim's first meeting with them turned out very awkward, so he kept going back in time until everything went smoothly. That evening, Tim invited Mary to the theater, but she was too tired to come, so he brought Rory instead. After the show, Tim spotted Charlotte, his first crush. He tried to talk to her, but it went poorly, so he rewound time and tried again. Still awkward. On the third try, he decided not to say anything. But outside the theater, it was Charlotte who saw him and came over. She invited him to dinner, and they had a fun and easy conversation. She admitted that she regretted turning him down the previous summer. Later, she invited him to her apartment and hinted for him to come inside. But Tim turned her down. He ran back to the person he truly loved. When he arrived, he gently woke Mary up and asked her to marry him. She happily said yes. That summer, Tim brought Mary home to meet his family. She quickly fit in, joining them for their usual tea by the beach. Tim spent time bonding with his father over a game of table tennis. During dinner, Tim announced that he and Mary were getting married, and everyone was thrilled. They became even more excited when they learned the couple was expecting a baby. Their wedding day came, but the outdoor reception was hit by a storm. Still, everyone had a great time. When the tent collapsed, the party moved indoors. Tim had chosen Rory to be his best man, but his speech turned out awful. So Tim dashed to his wardrobe and went back in time to change things. First, he picked Harry to give the toast, but it was dreadful. Then he chose Jay, but that also turned out badly. Finally, Tim picked his father, and James gave a heartfelt speech about how proud he was of his son. A few months later, Mary gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Posy. They moved into a new house, and Tim shared how much he was enjoying life. He felt so content that time travel no longer seemed necessary, but something was about to change that. On Posy's first birthday, everyone was there, except Kit Kat. Moments later, her boyfriend Jimmy showed up and said they had a fight earlier that day. Afterward, Kit Kat got drunk and drove off. She got into a car accident, and Tim rushed to the hospital with Mary. There, they found Kit Kat badly hurt. Tim traveled back in time to stop the accident. He picked Kit Kat up before she could drive and brought her home safely. While talking to her, Tim realized he had only fixed things for now. The real issue was her relationship. That's when Tim decided he had to do more. He opened up to Kit Kat and told her about his time travel ability. He now planned to take her back so she could make better choices. They returned to the New Year's Eve party, the night Kit Kat was supposed to meet Jimmy for the first time. When they spotted him, instead of getting close, Kit Kat walked up and punched and kicked him. They then returned to the present through the cupboard, and Kit Kat suddenly realized she was now in a relationship with Tim's friend Jay. In this new version of the present, the two were together, and happy. Tim smiled as he returned home to Mary, but when he picked up his baby, he was shocked. It was no longer Posy, he now had a baby boy. Worried, he went to his father and learned the reason. James explained that once you've had a child, you can't travel back to a time before their birth. Doing so would change the child. Tim understood what he had to do. He traveled back to the moment right before Kit Kat's accident and decided not to mess with the timeline any further. Tim and Mary stayed by Kit Kat's side at the hospital and told her they wouldn't leave unless she agreed to break up with Jimmy. Mary suggested she date someone kinder, and Tim brought up Jay, hinting that Jay used to like her. When they got back home, Tim was relieved to see Posy again. They had a second child, and the whole family looked happy. One evening, while Mary was busy preparing dinner for a best-selling author, Tim realized he'd left Posy near Mary's important manuscript. When they checked, the papers had already been torn to pieces. Mary was furious. Tim wanted to go back in time and fix it, but before he could, they received a call from his mother. The news was heartbreaking. His father had cancer. They quickly went to the beach house. Tim spoke with his dad, who said the illness might have been caused by his smoking. But there was no way to undo it, as that part of his life happened before Tim and Kit Kat were even born. James also said he might only have a few weeks left. Before they left, James shared his own secret to a happy life. First, live each ordinary day as it is, with all its stress and problems. Then, live it again, but this time, notice how lovely the world really is. Tim followed his father's advice and found joy in everyday things. Still, there were days he only wanted to live once, like the day of his dad's funeral. Not ready to say goodbye, Tim traveled back to when his father was still alive. James quickly figured out his son had just come from his funeral, and they talked about it like it was a regular day. Tim was comforted, knowing he could always come back to see him. But then one day, Mary said she wanted a third child. That left Tim with a hard choice. if they had another baby, he would never be able to return to a time when his father was still around. Months later, as the new baby was about to be born, Tim went back to visit his father one last time. While they played table tennis, Tim broke down in tears. James understood, it was their final moment together. So they traveled back to Tim's childhood, sharing one last memory by the beach, being careful not to change anything. Back in the present, Tim learned to let go. Mary gave birth to their third child. Kit Kat was also now a happy mom with her and Jay's child. In the end, Tim discovered his own way of living well. He stopped traveling through time and chose instead to live each day fully, as if it were his last.